Well, recent reports suggest that house prices are plummeting in some Auckland suburbs at least. But is that really the case? And does it include your suburb? Here to explain how house price values are reported and why such accounts aren't necessarily all that useful is One Roof property commentator Ashley Church. Good morning.
Yeah, motive stuff, Hayley. How are you this morning?
Very good.
Good. So this is based on a report that came out last week from the Real Estate Institute, and it's, just to be fair, it's a consistent report. It comes out once a month. It's one of a number that come out from different commentators, and it uses a standard methodology to determine what houses are worth. What this one did, which was a little bit mischievous, was it took some, keeping in mind that in Auckland there's about 150 suburbs, it took the top 15 and the bottom 15, for which there are some unusual results for this last month, and focused on those. What it didn't tell you, which was much more important, was that the overall measure for Auckland, which is the same number we use every month, was down 2.7%, which was almost exactly the same as the previous month. So the market is still flat.
Because I love what sort of language they use when they report on house prices plummeting or booming.
Reads well.
Yeah. But you just use mischievous.
Mischievous. Well, it's another word like plummeting.
Do you think that it was done on purpose?
No, I just think it's the sort of thing that it's a sort of a clickbait thing. It's one of those things that gets attention. You read that, and the other thing, of course, is that it scares people. If you happen to live in one of those suburbs which are purported to have gone down, then you panic. You look at that and you think, oh my God, my house is worth less. So really important to actually understand, excuse me, how prices are actually determined in these reports. And so what happens is the methodology is to use something called a median price. Now, don't want to bore people with math, but there's a difference between an average mean and an average median. So an average mean, let's take to come up with a median, let's give you an example. Let's say that there was a suburb where there were 7 house sales in a month. 3 of those for 800,000, one of those was for 400,000, and 3 of them were for 200,000. The median price is the middle price. So in that case, it would be $400,000.
It's going to sort of stick around what the middle price might be.
The average mean price is different. So the way the average mean's taken is you take those 7 sales, you add up the total value, and you divide it down the middle. So the mean price would be 400. The average price would be 485. So you can see that there can be quite a big difference.
We need to get you in talking about when we talk about wages and the economy, GDP. We'll get you in when we
to make them sound better or worse?
Well, you know, the outliers and how they lift it up, don't they?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to house prices. Which suburbs, were they talking about that apparently plummeted?
I actually haven't got those numbers on me, so I actually can't tell you that. But what I can tell you is that in respect of how those particular numbers were drawn, it's quite possible that they were drawn from a very small number of sales, and that's the problem with the mean. There could have been 3 or 4 sales in a suburb. The mean happens to be a higher or a lower figure because there was only 2 or 3 sales, and so it gives you a skewed result. The far more accurate result is that overall Auckland result, because that's drawn from a much larger number.
And what you're saying is it's still flat. So don't worry, it's not going up or down.
It's not going up, not going down, flat as it's been for quite some period of time.
Now, house sales, there have been reports that house sales and transfers to foreigners have fallen by more than 80%.
Yeah, 80% off 3%. So if you remember when we had this conversation last year...
Let's get back into the maths, shall we?
Well, only in the sense that if you look at what these numbers were actually extrapolated from last year, so the big debate was how much foreign buyers were actually impacting on the market, and the original claim was it was something like 30%. When Stats New Zealand, and to be fair, they've had a few problems recently, but when Stats New Zealand actually finally came up with the numbers, the number was around 3 or 4%. So when that foreign buyer ban came in, it was an impact on the market of about 3 or 4%. So 80% off 3% is whatever the math on that is. It's not a huge impact on the market, but it sounds impressive.
What if somebody out there is thinking about selling the house? How can they go and get an accurate idea of its value?
Well, the only way you can really get an accurate valuation on your house is actually sell it. That's the most accurate value you get. In the absence of that, if you want to get an indication of what your house is worth prior to actually selling it, then the best thing I would suggest is actually go to a registered valuer and get a proper registered valuation done. Because while these numbers are interesting, they really only measure trends. They can't actually tell you what your house is specifically worth.
What other things can tell us about the trends?
There are a few things that are used, and again, some of them are mischievous, depending on the way they're used, but there's something called sales volume that tells you the number of houses that have actually been sold in any given month. And that's great. It gives you a trend. It gives you an indication of where the volume of sales is up or down. Sometimes it's used to talk about sales dropping, which gives you an indication it's about price. It's not. It's just about numbers. markets. Another one is listing volumes, the number of houses that are actually being listed. And again, that's an interesting indicator of a trend because it tells you whether or not there's confidence in the market. And a variation of that is something called time to sell, which tells you how long it actually takes to sell a house. And again, that's really just an indicator of confidence in trends.
Would you say that in this flat market, the confidence is down a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. Confidence is really down now. And so what Kiwis tend to do, as opposed to, say, Australians, is we just tend to basically put our hands around our shoulders and just wait it out. So that's the reason our prices stay flat rather than plumbing it, is we just go, okay, well, I'm just going to hibernate for a couple of years until prices come right again.
Great. Excellent.
No problem.
Thanks so much, Ashley Church.
Thank you, Hayley.